As you know, we like to highlight interesting left-right dynamics on this show, and this one in particular caught my eye. So Tucker Carlson gave an very, frankly, very funny monologue about Joe Biden. Let's take a listen to that, and it was reacted to by Bernie Sanders' former press secretary, Briahna Joy Gray. First, let's listen to Tucker.
Underneath it all, he was a party man to the core, always sad. All of which means Joe Biden is now the presumptive Democratic nominee. Nobody really chose Biden for this job. He wound up in it by a series of defaults, and it shows. Ask yourself, is Joe Biden ready to lead this country? Could he find his car in a three-tiered parking garage? Could he navigate a salad bar? And by the way, what exactly is his position on the coronavirus pandemic? Those are the mysteries Democrats now face. Biden has been virtually invisible for the last month. That's not an accident. Joe Biden on camera means more moments like this.
We cannot let this, we've never allowed any crisis from the Civil War straight through to the pandemic of 17, all the way around 16. We have never let our democracy take second fiddle. We can both have a democracy and elections and at the same time correct the public health.
You follow that? Correct the public health. It's hard to imagine a man like that making it through a presidential debate or even staying awake through the inaugural proceedings. It seems likely that at some point Democratic leaders will try to find a way to replace Biden before the November election. Andrew Cuomo is the obvious replacement, but there are many others. Whatever happens, it's worth taking Joe Biden seriously for this moment, now that he is officially, in a sense.
And so after that scathing monologue, Briahna Joy Gray tweeted this, basically talking about how the Bernie Sanders campaign went far too light on Joe Biden at the time. Bernie was too kind for going after Biden, but it's coming. Either Dem leadership cares more about maintaining a corporate status quo than getting rid of Trump, or they're planning to replace Joe, adopting a pretty fast and loose relationship with representative democracy. Lose, lose. First admission, from the top of the Bernie Sanders campaign, that they went too light on Joe Biden. And one thing I should clarify, she was like, of course, Tucker's a bully. I know she has to add that.
Well, we saw that reporting when we had Dan Marins on this show, Huffington Post reporter, who's, very sympathetic to the Sanders movement and did a great job reporting on the campaign throughout. And that was basically the reporting that he got too, and some of what I've heard behind the scenes, frankly, as well, that basically they were clear-eyed about the whole way through that Biden was the real threat. Even as the media got obsessed with Liz and Pete and whoever, they knew that Biden was the only one who had that multiracial base of support that could ultimately expand, and that he was the real threat. And time after time, they tried to get Bernie to go after him. They could see it in the polling, like, this is what you need to do. Granted, I think it's always a risky strategy because it can backfire on you if it's not done well, and plays into the caricature that Bernie's too mean. Of course, the real problem is Bernie's too nice. But I think that's exactly right. It's also fun to see, frankly, now that Sanders campaign operatives are sort of like cut loose to be able to say what they really think.
Yeah, what they really think.
It's fun to see that. Sirota's been going off as well.
Yeah. I noticed that yesterday. Chuck noticed, because Chuck obviously watches the show, and he was saying, I know you guys thought we should hit Biden, but we were looking at the polling and we didn't know if that was going to work. But my counter to that would be, look at what happened in that 1 week period where David Sirota started, essentially by himself, started blasting Biden on two things, Social Security and on Iraq.
Yeah.
What was forced to happen? It wasn't the attack itself. It was that the media needs guidelines. They need something to cover in the horse race. So the moment Bernie and the campaign gave them that ammunition, what starts happening? Andrew Kaczynski at CNN starts reporting about Joe Biden's record on Social Security. Media reporters start digging through clips about Joe Biden talking about Social Security. Then what happens? Face the Nation, which is watched by millions of people in this country, has to book Joe Biden, or Joe Biden's surrogate, in that case, John Kerry, to talk about the Iraq war.
Right.
Which didn't go that well. That's the strategy. No, it didn't go well, which we covered here. That is how, even an attack, even raising the issue, even going after that, which he refused to do so many times, that's how you get the media. Because, again, what did we learn about this primary? Is that the media was the chief important, all-important thing whenever it comes to Democrats. Totally not the case when it comes to Republicans. But a huge amount of Democratic voters basically trust MSNBC and many of these other pundits in order to tell them to give permission to vote for, and at least how they view the political dynamics of the race and who can beat Donald Trump. that is when Biden started to take real hits, losing Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Because what does Social Security and Iraq highlight? Electability. Those are the core electability things. And this just shows you the danger of Bernie never being able to execute even very competently whenever it came to Social Security in Iraq. But then in terms of Biden's obvious decline in the state of affairs and the way that he carries himself in the media. And what Brianna, I think, was saying there is that by ignoring this, they've done a great disservice to the Democratic electorate. Because at this point now, of course, you think, I've never had a problem talking about it. I can guarantee you nobody on the Trump camp will cover a Trump ad later that speaks directly to the heart of this matter. Yeah. And he's going to get destroyed in the general public. And this is what Joe Rogan keeps talking about.
But we know they would rather lose to Trump than have Bernie Sanders as president. I mean, that just couldn't be more clear. So they wanted to hide all these issues, even if it means that they become super relevant and, destructive and determinative in the general election. They would rather keep them hidden than actually deal with them, because the last thing that they wanted, we saw the way they all coalesced, the way that they pulled the fire alarm and did everything they could to stop Bernie Sanders, who was up in every single poll. That's the other thing that Chuck said. Every single state, Super Tuesday, like a week beforehand, he was up in every single state. That's how close it was. And they had to pull the fire alarm and get in behind a guy that they obviously had a lot of reservations about. They know him better than we do, right? They've worked with him. They've seen it up close. They've watched that decline occur, over the years, and they saw his flaws even before that sort of obvious decline started to happen. So they know what they're getting here, but they would rather take their chances with Joe than win with Bernie, and that's the bottom line. I don't know if I buy the idea that they're going to try to replace Joe. Because
I don't think that's...
I think that they are fine with the fact he's so malleable. He's so easily controlled. Like, they know what you're going to get with him, right? And it's very standard issue. It's very comfortable for them. They can get in their next gen VP who'll also continue that neoliberal legacy, whether it's Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams or whoever it's going to be. So I think they're actually very comfortable with Joe. And as Cenk said yesterday, look, they're not afraid of losing to Trump. They know what that looks like. It's been good for their bottom lines, more or less. They've gotten their cable news contracts. They've become resistance heroes. This is all going fine for them.
Again, it tells you everything you need to know. The man he served as vice president under did not endorse him, and has not endorsed him. Maybe we should start a rising countdown clock about how many days after he becomes a presumptive nominee that Barack Obama continues to not endorse his former vice president. Tells you everything you need to know, folks. In terms of confidence in the job and all of that, I think almost every other sitting vice president who has run for president at least got the endorsement and support of their president while they were still in office. I can't think of another one. And yet, here we are. That tells you what you need to know about Joe. They did not coalesce around him whenever the time was really near, when the time was really nigh, like in Iowa and in New Hampshire, in those days and months leading up to that, because they knew that he probably couldn't get the job done. And now they're all gaslighting, pretending as if they always thought that he could. Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to say, because I think what Brianna's point is that Bernie was too nice to go after Joe and had too much personal feelings of affection to him. That was an ultimate weakness in the campaign. It may have been his greatest undoing in all this campaign, but we can't lose sight of the fact that the flip side of that is that kindness and desire to be above the fray and focus on policy is why so many millions were inspired by him, is why he had a shot in the Democratic primary at all, where he had a very high approval rating. So it was both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. And I think ultimately, his legacy is to be that prophet that points the way, that paves the road, that is the sort of ideological, intellectual founder of that movement that cobbled that all together. And now it's going to fall to someone else to finish the job. I keep hearing that, and I just don't buy it, which is that at the end of the day, inspiration is great, but victory is better. And
sure.
Victory is the most important
But how often in
thing.
History does that happen all in one figure? It just doesn't. I just don't think it's fair. Look, think about, and I think about my own journey on this. I didn't think it was allowed to ask for the things that Bernie Sanders has made mainstream in America. Like, he has truly created a movement that is beyond him. He has fundamentally shifted what's possible in this nation. That's an unbelievable accomplishment that I wouldn't have thought was possible just a few short years ago. So I don't want to take that away from him, even while saying, when it came down to doing what it took to get power, he did not have what it took. I mean, there's no doubt about that, but I don't think that negates the power of the legacy and what he did build and create in this country.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, he's
influenced your views.
Shifted the Overton window forever. I think he shifted many people on the right and to look at what's politically possible and the possibility of coalitions and maybe just waking people up to some certain issues. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think victory is the number one thing. And we'll see how that inspires something going forward and how that actually works in terms of a political movement.
Indeed, we will. All right, we'll have more Rising for you after this.